Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rake the Take, a golf betting podcast hosted by me, Chris Lewis. And this week, we're going to be going over the WM Phoenix Open and the Commercial Bank Qatar Masters. We'll also be going over the Riyadh LIV Golf Tournament very briefly. I have one small little bet for that. Mainly just because it's kind of hard to analyze those tournaments. But I used Data Golf's model for that to kind of make one play. But we'll get into that later. Obviously we're all here for the Phoenix Open most likely, so we'll go over that first and then go into the other stuff. But yeah, obviously, as you probably know, the WM Phoenix Open takes place at TPC Scottsdale at the stadium course. It's usually a very electric tournament from a atmosphere perspective. A lot of people love to go down and just get drunk and especially at the the iconic par 3 16th hole and just go crazy. But yeah, no, I mean it's definitely one of the best finishing stretches in golf. It's a phenomenal tournament kind of leading into the Super Bowl. It's a ton of fun, and it always usually has a top playoff finish kind of towards the end there. So I think it's a great tournament. Always one that I feel like people look forward to going into the season. As far as like the course goes, TPC Scottsdale, it's about a 7,300 yard par 71. And for the most part, I'd say like distance and having a good kind of tee to green game in general are very important around here. The greens are actually pretty soft, so you don't necessarily need to be a top tier putter to win at this event. As we've seen with guys like Hideki and Scotty Scheffler, depending on how he's doing with his putting, they have been able to really do well here. And I think, just kind of in general, being able to hit a lot of different types of approach shots is really going to matter at this course. It's not necessarily an event where you need a lot of driving accuracy, because in some of the waste areas you can have pretty decent lies, even if you don't make the fairway. It's not really a course that's really littered with a ton of rough. But overall, though, I will say that the course, it's not usually too difficult, as long as you're able to kind of hit a lot of greens. If you have a good short game, that will kind of go a good ways around here as well. A lot of the people who have done well here over the years do have a good around the green game. And the reason why that's important kind of ties into the approach play. And because you're going to have to hit a wide variety of approach shots going into these greens, you're going to need to be able to get up and down if you're not necessarily the most accurate with those clubs. And also just because of some of the shorter par 4s and everything, you can have some good opportunities if you're hitting it close to the green, to maybe chip in for eagle or par or birdie, I should say. I mean, but yeah, there's definitely going to be some scoreable opportunities from around the greens, depending on how aggressive you play some of these holes. But yeah, no, I mean it's a great tournament vibes wise, and it's a really fun event. I love the atmosphere at this course. But yeah, let's get into the picks. First off, I got Justin Thomas. I got him at 14-1. You can get him, I think, as at highest at like 16-1 right now or something like that. So I got a pretty bad number, but that's okay. That's kind of just something that happens with betting. But in terms of Justin Thomas, I mean, he's had a lot of success here. He's had 3 top 5s, and in the last 7 years, he's finished in the top 20 at this course. I do think really fits his style of play. Like I said with the putting, that's something that's Justin Thomas has struggled with over the years lately. But I think that you can be a bad putter and succeed at a course like this. His tee to green game is still so good, and even though the driving accuracy is not really the best with him, this is a course that doesn't really punish that all that much, and he still has very respectable distance off the tee. So I think he's going to be able to put himself in aggressive positions to be able to attack pins, whether it be on approach or around the greens. So I really love Justin Thomas this week. I mean, he's been in great form really since the end of last season. And I just think that kind of given the skill sets that this course requires, Justin Thomas could be a really good pick to kind of bounce back at this type of event. After kind of a subpar week at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Because, even before that, he has some great form. A second place finish at the American Express, and then 2 top fives at the Zozo and the Hero World Challenge, kind of ending 2024. So, I really do feel like Justin Thomas is kind of raring to have a great finish at some point this season with a win. He's just a very good player overall, and he's really bounced back from that tough stretch that he had in 2023, where he was really falling down a lot of people's rankings, and he just was not the same player that he usually was, or that he should be. But I think he's definitely getting back to the Justin Thomas that we all know. His iron play is kind of back into the elite area of golfers in the 98th percentile. He's in the 99th percentile around the greens. He is basically elite at any part around the greens, whether it be chipping from the fairway or the rough, or having to save from the bunker. He's in the 99th percentile in all those categories. Does he have the highest average strokes gained around the green in the world? I feel like he would have to, given that number. Yeah, no, he is by actually a decent margin. In skill ratings around the green, he actually averages a tenth of a stroke more than guys like Patrick Cantlay, Webb Simpson, Hideki Matsuyama, Patrick Reed, Cam Smith. Those are all elite short game players, and Justin Thomas averages more strokes gained around the greens than any of them, which is pretty amazing. So, Justin Thomas, obviously the driving accuracy and the putting are big concerns. He's just so streaky with the putter. There are times where it's just such an average skill set for him at times. So I really just think that this is a good course fit for him though, and I'm happy to kind of take the huge price on him, especially since this is kind of a down week in terms of a lot of the other top golfers playing in a field like this. So I love Justin Thomas. I think he's a great pick this week. Full endorsement there. But yeah, beyond that, since I'm hugely invested into Justin Thomas, I've taken just a few more long shots this week. I have Mackenzie Hughes at 175 to 1. With Mackenzie Hughes, if you look at his course history here, it's really porous. He has not played great here at all. And I think that's mainly because it's like a lot of the results are really from earlier in his career when he wasn't as good as he is kind of more recently, as he has been more recently. And also it's just, you consider just the fact that he's just not an elite ball striker. And obviously that's something that you kind of need here. But I'd say that, in terms of distance, like he kind of lies right around the average, maybe a little above average in terms of distance on the PGA Tour. He can hit it pretty far at times. But the thing is that he's just not very accurate with the driver. And that's something that you can kind of get around at a course like this, as long as you're able to hit greens. And that's kind of the one thing that the problem with him, is that he really hasn't been able to be consistent at that, from approach shots from 100 to 200 yards. He ranks pretty poor on those kind of categories among in comparison to the other PGA Tour players. But he's actually, one of the better players in the world from 50 to 100 yards. So I do think that there is some potential there to kind of improve upon some of these performances that he's had over the years, even though we all know that he's not an elite approach player. He's very good around the greens and with the putter. So I think that's something that could really kind of benefit him this week. And as we saw to kind of end 2024 as a year in the fall swing, and in certain events to kind of end the season, his approach play has gotten better in some parts. So I do think that, it is something that he has improved a lot on over the years. And I don't think he is as poor on approach as he usually has been. I think it's something that he's definitely greatly improved upon. That hasn't necessarily come to fruition yet in 2025, especially kind of considering how he did at the Sony Open and the American Express and at Pebble Beach. But, it's still early in the season to where I feel like it's not necessarily something that I view as a major concern. There are still a lot of positive results from the end of 2024 and from just the whole year in general. So I think that's something to note going into an event like this. If he's able to, especially if he's able to have a lot of shots between 50 and 100 yards and some of these, par fours and par fives, I think that could definitely benefit him this week, in terms of scoring. And yeah, like I said, around the greens, he's one of the best in the world, and one of the best in the world with the putter. So I do feel like those skill sets, even though putting isn't necessarily something I'm really looking at this week, the around the green game is definitely something that I find to be very encouraging. But yeah, I like Mackenzie Hughes despite all that history. And then after that, I really like Matt Wallace this week. I got him at 200 to 1. And I think this is a good number because, he's, even though he hasn't really had the best of history on the PGA Tour, I do feel like he is playing some of his best golf since he was really starting to do well in majors and things like that going into 2019 and 2018. He's playing his best golf since then. And the big thing about Matt Wallace is that on the PGA Tour, he just has really struggled at times with the putter and also with his his approach play. But his approach play is actually, I think, really has improved a lot over the years. I'd say he's a pretty good player now from between 50 to 200. From 200 plus, he's still a little bit average, but from 50 to 200 yards, he's actually he's a pretty solid player, kind of ranking in the 60th percentile and above. And he's always had some respectable distance. He hits it a little bit farther than the tour average, but he's also in the 94th percentile around the greens. The biggest struggle for him is really between, with scoring putts. From 2 to 5 feet, he's very poor, and from 5 to 30 feet, he's very average. But I do think overall, though, he's improved on that putting, especially on the DP World Tour. He's had a lot of great finishes to kind of end 2024. Between September and November, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 finishes within the top 25, including 2 top 10s, including a top 5, and a win at the Omega European Masters. We're actually won losing strokes on approach, which is kind of interesting and atypical for him. But I do think that this is a course that should set up well for him, even though he doesn't have the best course history here. He has 2 missed cuts and a tie for 53rd. In that tie for 53rd, he actually did have some solid ball striking numbers, but really just did not putt well that week. But I do think that this course could set up well for his game, especially with how good he is around the greens. He should be a much better tee to green player, I love the value at 200-1, especially given his form in the DP World Tour. He hasn't had the best start to 2025. Since, he's had a tie for 45th at the Hero Dubai Desert Classic, and then he missed the cut at the Farmers Insurance Open, but a lot of that was because of poor putting and also just bad conditions in general throughout the week. So, I'm not going to begrudge him too much for a poor Farmers Insurance Open performance, because that tournament was just kind of weird in general. So I don't really feel that worried about Matt Wallace's kind of downturn in form since the great DP World Tour end of 2024 run. But I do think that Matt Wallace has improved a lot, especially over the 2024 season, and I think this is a good kind of value bet to kind of get into him before maybe he starts really playing well on the PGA Tour. And then finally, I got Andrew Putnam. At plus 25,000. Putnam, I think the biggest thing about him is that he just has not really a ton of distance. And distance has really been a big deciding factor at this event. But he's very accurate off the tee. He's one of the most accurate players in the world. And he's actually a great approach player. 85th percentile on approach, 90th percentile around the greens, and he's in the 70th percentile in putting. He actually used to be a much better putter than this. He would have been closer to the 90th percentile in putting if we looked at this in like 2023 or in the early parts of 2024. But yeah, 2024 was not necessarily his best year in terms of putting. But he's always been a good putter throughout his career. And so far this season, he's had some okay results. He had a tie for 30th at the Sony Open. He missed the cut, unfortunately, at the American Express, and then a tie for 32nd performance at the Farmers Insurance Open, which is very respectable. He actually had a really solid week ball striking, and just really didn't make a ton of putts, but because of the wind, I can totally understand that. And if you look at his course history here at the Phoenix Open, it's actually he's missed a lot of cuts, but he has a tie for 7th finish in 2021. And I think most of this overall is just kind of having to do with the lack of distance at this course. It's kind of really requires him to really be gaining a lot of strokes on approach and around the greens, which he didn't really do in those events at the time. But, I do think that overall, he does have the skill set to succeed here, especially like we saw with that top 10 finish in 2021. So I do think that, maybe he's just underperformed here relative to how, with his skill sets relative to, what he usually averages with that. So, I'm not really going to begrudge him too much for those results. I still feel like he's a good course fit, and I love the value, honestly. Even though he's not really a player that's really contended at a lot of events recently, in 2023, he had a much better season, like with top 5 finishes at the Memorial, for example. So, he can play, in a tough field. He's maybe a little bit more suited for a tougher golf course, but I do think that you do need to be able to have a solid short game to be able to play well at this place, which I do think he provides, and he's a great approach player. So I love the value. So that's kind of why I think Putnam is a very solid bet this week, especially at 250-1. You can even probably get him higher than that now. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Phoenix Open. Very tight card this week. Not trying to go too many guys, especially since we're betting some of these other tournaments too. But yeah, let's kind of move on to the Qatar Masters. With the Qatar Masters, they play at Doha Golf Club, which is in Doha, obviously in Qatar. And it's a 7,400 yard par 72. And I think with the biggest thing with this tournament is that from what I saw from my analysis, is that you do need to be somewhat of a solid driver of the golf ball to do well here, whether it be accuracy wise, but you can also do well around the greens, kind of similarly with the Phoenix Open. There are a lot of short par fours and par fives where you can potentially score with around the greens. And some just like the way they have the pin locations usually kind of helps with that. But yeah, I know a lot of around the green players. That's kind of what I'm looking for this week. In mainly a field where it's like there's not really a ton of great ball strikers. But I do think that that's kind of one of the main skill sets that you really need to have is just a very strong wedge play. I think that's going to be very important this week. And just also just kind of having a good short game and putting. I think those are some of the more valuable skills. But yeah, let's kind of get on to the picks. This week I have Guido Migliozzi. Guido, he's if you've seen some of the majors over the past 5 years, he's been in some of those events, and he's a big fist bumping Italian. He's very fun to watch. Very emotive player. But he's coming off a pretty solid 2024 season where he had numerous top 10s and top 5 finishes, including a win at the KLM Open. So Guido, I do feel like that he's a solid bet this week to kind of to do well. He's been in good form. He played well at the Hero Dubai Desert Classic, even though he's not necessarily the best ball striker in the world. He's pretty accurate off the tee, and he's great around the greens. He's a very solid short game. The approach play can be kind of streaky at times. But when he has it going with the ball striking, because of his short game, he's really able to win a lot of events on the DP World Tour. He's very solid, and he was one of a lot of events on the DP World Tour. He's very much an accomplished player. So I like Guido this week. I got him at 45-1, which I think is a pretty solid price given his win equity on the tour. And I think that this is a solid event for him, especially with his around the green ability. I mean, he hasn't really played all that well at this event over the years, but I think a lot of that is also just because of maybe some bad putting and things like that. Things that aren't necessarily something that he usually deals with. So yeah, I think it's mainly out of bad luck and anything else. I think this is a good course fit for him, and I like the form that he's been coming into lately outside of the last 2 starts on the DP World Tour. I think overall, if you look at the total profile, especially going into 2024, he's had some very solid results, and the ball striking's been a lot better. I think there's some bad weeks on approach that he has, but I just don't think that's something that you can really expect with him. I do think he'll bounce back with the approach play. But yeah, outside of that, we got Andrea Pavon, and he just had a really solid week at the Bahrain Championship. I got another Italian on my betting card, and he's Pavon also is coming off a solid 2024 season where he had multiple top 5s. And also many top 25 finishes. I think the big thing with him is that he's not a very far hitter off the tee. He's much more of an accuracy kind of guy. He's kind of streaky with the approaches, kind of like with Guido, but he also has a very solid short game. So it's like he has some very similar he's a very similar statistical profile to Guido. Both are just very good around the greens, and kind of just have great ball striking weeks at certain times. It's not something that you can really count on, but this has been kind of a career resurgence for Pavon after kind of falling off in 2020. He really started to come back into 2024 and kind of going into now 2025. So this is definitely some of the best golf that he's been playing. in a long time. So I do like Pavon. I do think that he's a solid bet this week. Um, Not to get confused with Matthew Pavon. This is Andrea Pavon. Um, Different country, different spelling. But yeah, so, just just making it clear for you, making it clear. But yeah, after that we got John Perry at plus 10,000. It's kind of surprising to see him this high. After having a great 2024 season where he was kind of dominating a lot of events on the DP World Tour and on the Challenge Tour, kind of fully earning his DP World Tour car back this season. He's actually had some solid. He's had some solid starts. He won the Afro Asia Bank Marrakesh Open and the Alfred, and he had a tie for second finish at the Alfred Dunhill Championship. So I think it's kind of surprising that he's missed 3 straight cuts to begin the 2025 calendar year, but kind of going into this week, he's had a lot of really good finishes, and he's still 5th in the Race to Dubai rankings. So I think this is a good kind of buy low opportunity and a great number for a guy that I feel like has just been really consistent over the course of 2024. And I don't really expect this streak of poor play to continue. I mean, this is the 4th event that he's won in the past year. He's won 4 events in the past year. Like, that's pretty impressive to me. So it's not really something that I'm going to give him a lot of flack for, that he's just kind of had a bad streak of golf. This should be a good course fit. He's very accurate off the tee, right around the greens. So I do think that he could potentially really do well at this event. Especially at plus 10,000 or 100 to 1. I think that's a great price for a player that has displayed a lot of consistency. After that, we got, I got to pull up my pronunciation card for this, just because there's a lot of, don't want to butcher anybody's name here, a lot on the line. But yeah, Jock Kruiswijk. He is a South African golfer. Another kind of short game specialist. He's great around the greens. And he's not porous off the tee. Has some solid distance and a little bit of accuracy here and there. He's pretty inconsistent, with the approach play, but I think that's an okay at this event. I mean, he's had some solid results here over the years. He's finished in the top 40 every year that he's played here. So I really like that value at plus 10,000, especially since he's been playing some pretty solid golf as of late. Over the past few months, he has a tie for 7th finish at the Andalusia Masters, and then he also had a top 5 finish on the Sunshine Tour, and then also just a tie for 21st finish at the Euro Dubai Desert Classic, where he had a very solid week on approach. So it does seem like that skill set has kind of improved a little bit over the past few months, which you like to see, which has kind of helped him have some good results. But yeah, no, even though he's kind of average off the tee, the short game is definitely something that kind of carries him around at these kind of events. And that's happened a lot here, where he's gained strokes around the greens in all 4 events and gained strokes off the tee. He's gained approach in 2 of the events, and the 2 events where he's finished tied for 39th and tied for 38th, he actually lost a lot of strokes putting, which is very unusual for him at this point in his career. He's a very solid putter, so I think could be something that could turn around, especially since he's had a lot of experience playing decent golf here. So yeah, Jock Kruiswijk, I like him, especially at 100 to 1. After that, I got Brandon Wu, who you may recognize that name. He was on the PGA Tour. He lost his tour card, unfortunately, at the end of the season and didn't qualify with Q School. So he's now a full-time member on the DP World Tour, opting to do that instead of going to the Corn Ferry. Overall, it's been kind of a rough start and rough go recently on the DP World Tour. I mean, he doesn't really know a lot of these courses, so I don't really blame him. But I do think with Brandon Wu that this is a solid course fit. He's not really an abysmal player on approach, but he's not really the best player at that either. Driving is kind of hasn't really necessarily been his best skill set, but he's very solid around the greens and with the putter, which I really value highly this week. So I do think Brandon Wu is a good guy to bounce back. I mean, especially at 125 to 1. I think that's a great price for somebody who, has played a lot on the PGA Tour and should honestly be a much better player than this. There's a couple, in 2023, it really felt like that he was having a real come-on season, and especially with top fives at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and the Mexico Open. But in 2024, he just really didn't have a lot of great results. Only a few top 20s and a tied for 10th finish. He missed a lot of cuts. And that's really going to hurt you on the PGA Tour. But overall, though, I do think that this is a good course fit for Brandon Wu, especially if he can kind of pick up some of the ball striking and have a little bit more accuracy and approach and better approach play. But yeah, no, that's kind of what I see from Brandon Wu. I think it's a good price, good buy low opportunity on him. I think he should do well overall on the DP World Tour. So that's something I'm definitely willing to kind of bet on early. And then my final bet is I have Matthias Schwab. And Matthias Schwab, he's an Austrian player. He was on the PGA Tour for a little bit in 2023, 2020, and 2022 after having a great 2021 season where he had phenomenal ball striking numbers. Unfortunately, a lot of that ball striking has really fallen off, and he started to lose a lot of distance and accuracy with the driver. The putting also kind of fell off a little bit there on the PGA Tour, but it's really started to actually come back over the last couple months. He's really starting to putt better again. What he's really just been losing a lot of strokes with now is the driver, and it's mainly just because he has lost so much distance, and the accuracy off the tee has kind of been hit or miss as well. He started to kind of gain a lot of accuracy to begin 2024 and kind of in the middle of 2024. But lately, a lot of that driving accuracy has really fallen off. And on approach, I mean, he kind of like Mackenzie Hughes, he really struggles a lot from the further distances. But around the greens and with the short game, he's very solid. And he's displayed that with a tied 31st finish here. Even though he didn't really have very solid ball striking that week or really didn't putt all that great. So you can definitely score well here around the greens, and I think that's something that he can do as long as he's not putting himself in outrageous positions because of his ball striking. But at the value at 250 to 1, I just think that's a good price in case that he does kind of regain some visibility. It just seems like that this is just maybe a little bit of a good buy low opportunity for a guy who displayed a lot of talent, in 2019 and 2020. I mean, he was maybe arguably like a top 50 player in the world kind of going into COVID. And then like a lot of that just kind of changed. Like he top five. He had a top 5 at a WGC and plenty of fantastic results in 2019. It's just kind of one of those weird things where a player that was so dominant on the DP World Tour, and even like when he played on the Corn Ferry at times, like he really did well. I mean, there was like a 2-3 year stretch there where he was just a very impressive golfer. And he continued that a little bit on the PGA Tour, but it just really fell off, and his ball striking kind of just deteriorated over the past few years. And he just hasn't really been able to replicate that consistency. Last year was his first full year back on the DP World Tour, and he had some good results here and there, even though he has missed a lot of cuts lately, though. So it's like it's sad to see him fall off like this. He was definitely a very promising player earlier in his career, but a lot can change, and it's just something that not like your skill sets aren't always reliable narrators. On the PGA Tour, especially, because the courses are just so different. But I do think that Matthias Schwab could bounce back at an event like this. So, I mean, at 250 to 1, why not? I think it's not impossible that he really bounces back. But yeah, geez. That's pretty much that card this week for the DP World Tour. Just kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of short game specialists. I just feel like that's kind of an important skill set at this course. And even though it's a 7,400 yard golf course, I don't really feel like that. Because sometimes they do have just some terrible conditions here and a lot of wind. A lot of it is just kind of getting up and down and trying to figure out how to have to put yourself in a good position, with a lot of elevated greens and windy conditions. It's just a very tough golf course at times to kind of navigate around, and you do need to have a good around the green game because of some of the bunkers as well. So yeah, all those factoring in, it can be a very tough golf course, depending on the wind. But yeah, we got one more event to go over, and that's just the Riyadh tournament for LIV, which is the first event to begin their season. And I only got one bet for this week, and that's Chieh-Po, who's from Chinese Taipei. And with Lee, the reason why I took him is because he's probably one of the only guys that has played the Riyadh Golf Club course. Not a lot is really known about this course because they've really only started playing it recently. And it's a par 72. And there are some long par 5s and things like that. But the big thing about this event is that they're playing it under the lights. And so I do feel like you need to have some course familiarity to kind of be able to do something like that. And he's one of the only guys that's actually played multiple events at this course. He's new on the LIV Tour this year. And I didn't really put full units on this. I kind of just did this bet for the fun of it. But yeah, it's just I figured why not at 200 to 1, especially since he's one of the only guys that really has any familiarity with this course, outside of a few other guys who have played the one public investment fund event that they had here to end 2024. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm relying on. I don't really feel like that a lot of the guys are necessarily going to be guaranteed to have great weeks this week under the lights. So that's why I'm kind of just taking a long shot and seeing what happens. It's just kind of one of those weeks, man. It's just it's just a weird event on the LIV Tour. I don't really see a ton of value other than this. So that's what I'm going with. Data Golf's model, has him around closer to 125 to 1 than 200 to 1. So that's kind of what I'm basing this off of. So yeah, no, I just playing it safe. Just doing. Now we're not really playing it safe, but didn't really invest a ton of in terms of money on that. Especially with what I got going on with these other tournaments and Justin Thomas. Um, but yeah, no, I mean overall though, this is gonna be a fun week. I'm excited for the Phoenix Open leading into the Super Bowl, and the Qatar Masters should also be a fun event as well. Um, but yeah, just kind of going over the picks again real quick. I got Justin Thomas, Mackenzie Hughes, Matt Wallace, and Andrew Putnam at the Phoenix Open. And then I have Guido Migliozzi, Andrea Pavon, John Perry, uh, Jacques Kreuzweig, Brandon Wu, Matthias Schwab at the Qatar Masters, and then Chieh-Po Lee at the LIV Golf Tournament in Riyadh. Um, so yeah, thanks for listening, and good luck this week if you tail my picks. It should be a very exciting week for golf.